Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I have the Ulysses book again. We've done part one, so this is part two. So if you didn't hear part one, you might want to go back. My voice is still a little funky, because of my cold, so we'll see if I can make it through. I don't know how much I'll be able to read, but we were at the Cyclops Cave, which sounds pretty exciting. Here's the problem I'm having. I have to clear my throat too often, and I find it distracting. So hopefully I won't have to do that. Take a glass of water. All right. After he had rescued his crew from Lotus Land, Ulysses found that he was running from one trouble into another. They were still at sea, and there was no food for the fleet. The men were hungry and getting dangerous. Ulysses heard them grumbling. He should have left us there in Lotus Land. At least when you're asleep, you don't know you're hungry. Why did he have to come wake us up? He knew that unless he found food for them very soon, he would be facing a mutiny. That part of the Aegean Sea was dotted with islands. On every one of them was a different kind of enemy. The last thing Ulysses wanted to do was go ashore. But there was no other way of getting food. He made a landfall on a small mountainous island. He was very careful. He had the ships of the fleet moor offshore and selected 12 of his bravest men as a landing party. They beached their skiff and struck inland. It was a wild, hilly place full of boulders with very few trees. It seemed deserted. Then Ulysses glimpsed something moving across the valley on the slope of the hill. He was too far off to see what they were, but he thought they must be goats since the hill was so steep. And if they were goats, they had to be caught. So the men headed downhill, meaning to cross the valley and climb the slope. Ulysses had no way of knowing it, but this was the very worst island in the entire sea on which the small party could have landed. For here lived the Cyclops, huge, savage creatures, tall as trees, each with one eye in the middle of his forehead. Sorry. Once, long ago, they had lived in the bowels of Olympus, foraging thunderbolts for Zeus. But he had punished them for some fault, exiling them to this island where they had forgotten all their smithcraft and did nothing but fight with each other for the herds of wild goats, trying to find enough food to fill their huge bellies. Best of all, they liked storms. Storms meant shipwrecks. Shipwrecks meant sailors struggling in the sea who could be plucked out and eaten raw. And the thing they loved best in the world was human flesh. The largest and fiercest and hungriest of all the Cyclopses on the island was one named Polyphemus. He kept constant vigil on his mountain, fair weather or foul. If he spotted a ship and there was no storm to help, he would dive into the sea and swim underwater, coming up underneath the ship and overturning it. Then he would swim off with his pockets full of sailors. On this day, he could not believe his luck when he saw a boat actually landing on the beach and 13 meaty-looking sailors disembark and began to march toward his cave. But here they were, climbing out of the valley now, up the slope of the hill, right toward the cave. He realized they must be hunting the goats. The door of the cave was an enormous slab of stone. He shoved this aside so that the cave stood invitingly open, casting a faint glow of firelight upon the dusk. Sorry, hold I cannot wait to be done with this cold. Okay. Over the fire on a great spit, 8 goats were turning and roasting. The delicious savors of the cooking drifted from the cave. Polyphemus lay down behind a huge boulder and waited. The men were halfway up the slope of the hill when they smelled the meat roasting. They broke into a run. Ulysses tried to restrain them, but they paid no heed. They were too hungry. They raced to the mouth of the cave and dashed in. Ulysses drew his sword and hurried after them. When he saw the huge fireplace and the 8 goats spitted like sparrows, his heart sank, because he knew that they had come into reach of something much larger than themselves. However, the men were giving no thought to anything but food. They flung themselves on the spit and tore into the goat meat, smearing their hands and faces with sizzling fat, too hungry to feel pain as they crammed the hot meat into their mouths. There was loud rumbling sound. The cave darkened. Ulysses whirled around. He saw that the door had been closed. The far end of the cavern was too dark to see anything. But then, amazed, aghast, he saw what looked like a huge red lantern far above, coming closer. Oh my gosh. Then he saw the great shadow of a nose under it and the gleam of teeth. He realized that the lantern was a great flaming eye. Sorry. Then he saw the whole giant, tall as a tree, with huge fingers reaching out of the shadows, fingers bigger than bailing hooks. They closed around 2 sailors and hauled them screaming into the air. As Ulysses and his horrified men watched, the great hand bore the struggling little men to the giant's mouth. He ate them, still wriggling, the way a cat eats a grasshopper. He ate them clothes and all, growling over their raw bones. The men had fallen to their knees and were whimpering like terrified children. But Ulysses stood there, sword in hand, his agile brain working more swiftly than it ever had before. "Greetings," he called. "May I know to whom we are indebted for such hospitality?" The giant belched and spat out buttons. "I am Polyphemus," he growled. "This is my cave, my mountain, and everything that comes here is mine. I do hope you can all stay to dinner. There are just enough of you to make a meal, ho ho." As he laughed, a great choking phlegmy laugh, swiftly lunged and caught another sailor, whom he lifted into the air and held before his face. "Wait," cried Ulysses. "What for?" "You won't enjoy him that way. He is from Attica, where the olives grow. He was raised on olives and has a very delicate, oily flavor. But to appreciate it, you must taste the wine of the country." Oh, tricky. Wine? What is wine? It's a drink made from pressed grapes. Have you never drunk it? We drink nothing but ox blood and buttermilk here. Ah, you do not know what you have missed, gentle Polyphemus. Meat eaters in particular love wine. Here, try it for yourself. Ulysses unslung from his belt a full flask of unwatered wine. I'm sorry. He gave it to the giant, who put it to his lips and gulped. He coughed violently and stuck the sailor in a little niche high up in the cave wall, then leaned his great slab of a face towards Ulysses and said, "What did you say this drink was?" "Wine, a gift of the gods to man, to make women look better and food taste better." Wow. "And now it is my gift to you." It's good, very good. He put the bottle to his lips and swallowed again. You are very polite. What's your name? My name? Why, I am nobody. Nobody? Well, nobody. I like you. You're a good fellow. And do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to save you till last. Yes, I'll eat all your friends first and give you extra time. That's what I'm going to do. Sorry, I have to clear my throat. I can't believe this. Okay. Ulysses looked up into the great eye and saw that it was redder than ever. It was all swimming redness. He had given the monster, who had never drunk spirits before, undiluted wine. Surely it must make him sleepy. But was a gallon enough for that great gullet? Enough to put him to sleep? Or would he want to eat again first? Eat 'em all up. Nobody. Save you till later. Sleep a little first, shall I? Won't try to run away, will you? No, you can't. You can't open the door. It's too heavy. Ha ha. You take a nap too, nobody. I'll wake you for breakfast. Breakfast. The great body crashed full length on the cave floor, making the very walls of the mountain shake. Polymephus lay on his back, snoring like a power saw. The sailors were still on the floor, almost dead from fear. Up, cried Ulysses. Stand up like men. Do what must be done, or you will be devoured like chickens. He got them to their feet and drew them about him as he explained his plan. Listen now, and listen well, for we have no time. I made him drunk, but we cannot tell how long it will last. Ulysses thrust his sword into the fire. They saw it glow white hot. There are 10 of us, he said. 2 of us have been eaten, and one of our friends is still unconscious up there on the shelf of a rock. You 4 get on one side of his head, and the rest on the other side. When I give you the word, lay hold of the ear on your side, each of you, and hang on no matter how he thrashes. I was confused. I thought they were talking about the guy, but they're talking about the Cyclops. Okay, that makes sense. And hang on no matter how he thrashes, and I am going to put out his eye. And if I am to be sure of my stroke, you must hold his head still. 1 stroke is all I will be allowed. Smart. Then Ulysses rolled a boulder next to the giant's head and climbed on it, so that he was looking down into the eye. It was lidless and misted with sleep, big as a furnace door and glowing softly like a banked fire. Ulysses looked at his men. They had done what he had said, broken into 2 parties, 1 group at each ear. He lifted his white, hot sword. Now, he cried. Driving down with both hands and all the strength of his back and shoulders and all the rage and all the fear, Ulysses stabbed that glowing spike into the giant's eye. His sword jerked out of his hand as the head flailed upward. Men pelted to the ground as they lost their hold. A huge, screeching, curdling blow split the air. This way, shouted Ulysses. He motioned to his men, and they crawled on their bellies towards the far end of the cave where the herd of goats was tethered. They slipped into the herd and lay among the goats as the giant stomped about the cave, slapping the walls with great blows of his hand, picking up boulders and cracking them together in agony, splitting them to flinders, clutching his eye, a scorched hole now from which the brown blood gelled. He moaned and gibbered and bellowed in frightful pain. His groping hand found the sailor in the wall, and he tore him to pieces between his fingers. Ulysses could not even hear the man scream because the giant was bellowing so. Now Ulysses saw the Cyclops' wild stampeding was giving place to a plan. For now he was stamping on the floor in a regular pattern, trying to find and crush them beneath his feet. He stopped moaning and listened. The sudden silence dazed the men with fear. They held their breath and tried to muffle the sound of their beating hearts. All the giant heard was the breathing of the goats. Then Ulysses saw him go to the mouth of the cave and swing the great slab aside and stand there. He realized just in time that the goats would rush outside, which is what the giant wanted, for then he could search the whole cave. Ulysses whispered quickly, "Swing under the bellies of the rams. Hurry, hurry." Luckily, they were giant goats and thus able to carry the men who had swung themselves under their bellies and were clinging to the wiry wool. Ulysses himself chose the largest ram. They moved toward the mouth of the cave and crowded through. The Cyclops' hands came down and brushed across the goat's back, feeling for the men, but the animals were huddled too close together for him to reach between and search under their bellies, so he let them pass through. Oops. Now the Cyclops rushed to the corner where the goats had been tethered and stamped, searched, and roared through the whole cave, bellowing with fury when he did not find them. The herd grazed on the slope of the hill beneath the cave. There was a full moon. It was almost bright as day. "Stay where you are," Ulysses whispered. He heard a crashing, peered out, and saw great shadowy figures converging on the cave. He knew that the other Cyclopses of the island must have heard the noise and come to see. He heard the giant bellow. The others called to him, "Who has done it? Who has blinded you?" "Nobody. Nobody did it. Nobody blinded me." "Ah, you have done it yourself. What a tragic accident." And they went back to their own caves. "Now," said Ulysses, "follow me." He swung himself out from under the belly of the ram and raced down the hill. The others raced after him. They were halfway across the valley when they heard great footsteps rushing after them, and Polyphemus bellowing nearer and nearer. "He's coming," cried Ulysses. "Run for your lives." They ran as they had never run before, but the giant could cover 50 yards a stride. It was only because he could not see and kept bumping into trees and rocks that they were able to reach the skiff and push out on the silver water before Polyphemus burst out of the grove of trees and rushed onto the beach. They bent to the oars, and the boat scudded toward the fleet. Polyphemus, heard the dip of the oars and the groaning of the oarlocks, and aiming at the sound, hurled huge boulders after them. They fell all around the ship, but did not hit. The skiff reached Ulysses' ship, and the sailors climbed aboard. "All anchor and away," cried Ulysses, and then called to the Cyclops, "Poor fool, poor blinded, drunken, gluttonous fool. If anyone else asks you, it is not nobody, but Ulysses who has done this to you." But he was to regret this final taunt. The gods honor courage, but punish pride. For Polyphemus prayed to Poseidon, "God of the sea, I beg you, punish Ulysses for this. Visit him with storm and shipwreck and sorceries. Let him wander many years before he reaches home. And when he gets there, let him find himself forgotten, unwanted, a stranger." Poseidon heard this prayer and made it all happen just that way. Oh my gosh. Pride. All right, guys. That's all my throat